Good afternoon, Packers fans. Aaron Negler here with your Packers Daily Chat, coming to you live on the Cheesehead TV social channels. Happy Monday. Hope you all had a great weekend wherever you were, whatever you were doing. Naturally, you were absolutely carrying the G. And the Packers had their rookie minicamp, and now we have a bit of a lull when it comes to Packers activity. They'll be back later this next weekend for the next part of their offseason program in the house, so to speak. And we all know this is a pretty quiet time when it comes to the Packers calendar, but there's little bits and pieces and news, nothing earth shattering, obviously. But today I did want to talk about something that I started thinking about, weeks ago leading up to the draft when we were talking about the possibility of the Packers selecting a defensive tackle early in the draft, which clearly did not happen. It kind of resurfaced after my chat with Mark Oldacres looking at the winners and losers from this past draft. If you haven't checked that out, it went up live here on the channel about a couple hours ago. Make sure you do check out that conversation. Always good to talk to Mark. But I did want to touch on Kenny Clark a little bit today because there's certainly been a refrain, oft repeated, both here in our daily chats, but also kind of all over the Packers blogosphere about what a quote down year Kenny is coming off of, and certainly that is true when you talk about the stat sheet. There's a guy who had 1 sack. I believe he had 5 quarterback hurries or hit the quarterback, 5 times, 4 tackles for loss on the season total. Not what you're expecting after re-signing him just last offseason to a pretty significant deal, a third contract in Green Bay, which is a rare occurrence. We all know that when it comes to how the Packers operate. But it does seem like the narrative has twisted somewhat, and maybe some of this was happening in season, but certainly here in the offseason, I've heard a lot and seen a lot talked about what a down year or a quote unquote bad year Kenny had. And I do not think that's the case in any way, shape, or form. I think Kenny played a hell of a lot better than most people are giving him credit for. When you look at the improved run defense across the board, that wasn't just add TJ Slayton. I know we've talked a bit about the fact that, yes, Slayton is now out the door, and there's a decent chance that Kenny Clark is going to kick into the nose tackle position, will play there, probably on early downs in particular. And I do think that will help him when it comes to getting a few more notches on the stat sheet, so to speak. But let's not pretend like Kenny played like hot garbage last year, which is kind of, I don't know, again, the narrative that I've seen forming somewhat in certain parts of the internet. That is not the case in any way, shape, or form. Kenny still played at a very high level through most of, if not all, of 2024. He certainly did not affect the quarterback as much as you would like anyone to in that defensive front. I think he's going to be giving more opportunities to pin his ears back and get after the quarterback this year, not just because of the fact that, they obviously have a new defensive line coach. The rotation may change a little bit, hopefully keeping him fresher as the year goes on. But yes, I do think being on or being at nose tackle on early downs, especially when teams do try to take to the air early in the down and distance, I think it's going to give Kenny some ample opportunity to jump the snap count, use that, what I still think is very prevalent athleticism, to create havoc behind the line of scrimmage. I don't ever think he's going to be a double-digit sack guy. That is not going to be his game. Certainly, you would love it. I don't see that materializing suddenly. But I do think you're going to see him affect the quarterback a hell of a lot more in 2025. I don't doubt for a moment that much of what he was being asked to do last year, I'm not going to say hindered his production, but certainly didn't put him in the best position possible to be productive. I also think the fact that there wasn't someone selected early in this draft at the defensive tackle position certainly bodes well for his usage and his ability to get on the field and get opportunities to win some one-on-ones and to beat these guys in the trenches, especially, again, on early downs. I know third down, pinning your ears back, you'd like a lot more production there than what you got from everybody up front last year, including Kenny. But I think it's on early downs where you're going to see Kenny Clark really kind of remind people of how talented and special he is, because I do think he remains a special player. Despite all the negativity around his play in 2024, some of it warranted. I'm not saying you had a banner year by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think, again, he played a hell of a lot better than a lot of folks are giving him credit for in all facets of the game. And that's my 2 cents on that. Just something, like I said, I've been thinking about quite a bit, and I was kind of reminded of it when talking with Mark earlier today. Again, hope you'll check that out. It's right here on the channel. Hello to everybody in the comments section. So good to see everybody chiming in. Chuck Olson says, May the 4th, I watched The Hidden Fortress. Look at you. You going OG May the 4th. I like it. Kevin, thank you for the super chat, man. Really appreciate it. Malort sucks. So do the Bears. Go Pack. No doubt referencing my listening to Drew and KB saying that he coined the Cubs fans at American Family Field this weekend, Malort drinking douches. That's a quote. I mean, perfectly stated by KB. And yes, very much agree. The Cubs suck. Bears suck. Although the Cubs have a decent team this year. Not going to lie. But yes, correct. 1,000% correct, Kevin. Craig, thanks for the super chat, man. Appreciate you. How does a rookie contract work? Is there a minimum/maximum they can make? How is it decided? How rare is it for a rookie to hold out? Well, these days, Craig, it is incredibly rare because most of it is slotted. Yes, there is essentially what each draft slot is can be correlated to their slotted salary and or bonuses and how much they can make. It increases incrementally year by year, mostly because of the salary cap. But there's not a lot of wiggle room. And that's why you rarely, if ever, see holdouts. Every once in a while, you'll see a matchup of, say, a perennially, historically cheap owner/team with a quarterback that they draft high. And then occasionally you'll see rumblings of a holdout. The Chargers, sometimes the Browns, etc. Will go down that path simply because their ownership is trying to squeeze every last drop. But for the most part, that CBA adjustment of the rookie salary wage scale has eliminated holdouts as a reality. Essentially, and it's very super rare when you see that happen in the modern game. What else we got here, folks? Chuck Olson, still wondering about Kenny's toe? I can get you a toe, man, with polish. No, I mean, he went to that spot with Jay Glazer this offseason. Who knows what that did in regards to his rejuvenation. Dennis, thanks for checking out the stream on Facebook, man. I agree. I saw some write/talk that Clark was a possible liability. I just don't see that happening. I mean, you can say a lot of things about Kenny last year. You can talk about a dip in production, certainly, but a liability? That's ridiculous. And look, I know that I've seen folks citing his PFF grade after certain games. Man, get out of here with that nonsense. PFF grades aren't worth the pixels they're printed with. I encourage anyone and everyone who cites PFF grades to actually watch the tape. I am begging you from my soul. That's where I'm at with that. What else we got here, folks? Isaiah, I agree, Aaron. You see, that's all I need. Just agree, and then we can get on with our lives. I'm kidding. But I thank you. I appreciate it. Joe, thanks for the super chat, man. How much of an advantage is it for players and coaches that the returning players on defense won't be having to learn a new defensive scheme? I mean, I don't know if it's an advantage so much as it is an ability to take a pretty significant step forward. There should be noticeable growth on the defensive side as far as knowing when and where to be in certain calls. And more than anything, just having time on the grass, as Matt likes to say, in the defense against offenses, especially in the division. You don't have to look much further. I was rewatching the game at Minnesota 2 days ago, which I do not recommend anyone do because it is hard to watch. But the first touchdown they give up in that game is a classic example of still, somewhat moving parts. Who's got who? What's the rotation supposed to be? And now some of this is because Zayden Anderson went down with an injury, who had practiced at the safety spot opposite Xavier McKinney all week. So there's some forgiveness there, but I do think those are the types of things that won't happen in year two. Just being able to be on the same page, marrying the rush with the coverage on the back end, and being able to hopefully build off of what you succeeded at. The sim pressure stuff that you saw to great effect, utilized against certain teams, didn't work against everybody, and they didn't try it against everybody. But there's certainly going to be, I would suspect, more of that at the offer. And if they are unable to get home with 4, as they certainly found out throughout the first part of 2024, if that does start to rear its ugly head throughout 2025, they should be able to not only get to that sooner, but be able to use it much more effectively and throw in wrinkles that they probably didn't have last season. There's no doubt a lot of it, again, time on task, muscle memory, call it what you will, but guys just knowing where they're supposed to be instinctively rather than having to think about it certainly helps you heading into year 2, where again, I think it should provide a significant, noticeable jump from everybody on defense who are going into the second year in the system. Ben, thanks for the super chat, man. Appreciate you. I can't wait to see what Matt LaFleur and company come up with on offense. Savion and Golden could be really fun additions to a versatile offense. Very much agreed, Ben. Now, it's not going to be instantaneous. That's something I talked about with Mark today. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think you will see that play out as the season progresses. I don't doubt for a moment that, yes, Golden will be maybe not featured, but part of the rotation early on. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I do think certainly they're going to try and get him on the field earlier rather than later. With Savion Williams, I do think that is going to be a process, and I don't expect him to be a featured part of the rotation right from week 1. I don't doubt that as the season progresses, he will become more and more involved. But I also think, to your point, there is a lot of possibility and a lot of kind of versatility with both of those guys that should hopefully fuel some creative juice, so to speak, from Matt and the offensive guys, where we've certainly seen them, be able to utilize every inch of the field in the past. Like, I keep thinking back to Tyler Ervin's time, especially early in 2020, and how much they were able to kind of really utilize the entire field. Savion Williams' addition should certainly help in that regard, in a way that they've tried somewhat using Jaden Reed in that way. But I think Savion Williams will be a hell of a lot more effective in that regard. That's what I'm most looking forward to. Charm City, what's going on, man? Thanks for the super chat. Big question. Just kidding. Would they ever paint the Lambeau end zones gold with Green Bay and Packers and green like Super Bowl 1? Could be sweet, in my opinion. Appreciate you, Nags. I absolutely fucking love this idea, man. Could they? Yes. Would they? I doubt it. But man, yes, please. Jeez Louise, that would be a lot of fun. It's excellent. Craig, thanks for the super chat, man. You mentioned a new D-line coach. How much of an impact do they really have? What does a good coach bring? Is it technique improvement? It can possibly, that's one aspect. Technique, an emphasis on certain parts of technique. Rotation is the big one. That's something that I know I've joked with Justice about when it comes to Jerry Montgomery, who is now 2 defensive line coaches ago. Jerry always kind of drove me nuts with his reliance on vets to a fault and not allowing kind of the young guys to get on the field. That is where I think probably the biggest part of their job, you can see the output on the field. But also, yeah, certainly what they're being asked to do in certain situations, what they're being asked to do as far as the opponent and their quarterback and their quarterbacking style, their offensive style. You saw a lot about that early last year where, they were facing, a kind of a murderer's row of mobile quarterbacks, starting with Jalen Hurts down in Brazil. And they did do a good job of hemming those guys in, but it came somewhat at the expense of getting after the quarterback and affecting the quarterback. And to me, that's a big part of it. Obviously you have a call, right? You're rushing 4 and you're playing whatever coverage on the back, but rushing 4 has a lot of components to it. From alignment, how they're being asked to align pre-snap, depending on what the offense is doing. Sometimes you're trying to dictate, but also what style of rush you're asking for. If you're asking for just a blowing up of a gap, which is what this scheme is asking for for the most part, to asking them to 2 gap, which is not something that is prevalent in this scheme, but controlling a gap. You've seen this a lot, I think, on clips of William Brinson, his Georgia tape. He's doing a lot of 2 gapping. You'll see him controlling a gap, shedding the attempted block, and making a tackle. But these are all things that go into it. Like, how much are you asking them to just get upfield and create havoc? How much of you are you asking them to control a certain gap or their part of the field? These are all things that are part and parcel of each and every single call that, yeah, the defensive line coach has a lot of input into. But the biggest one is the rotation, is who's playing how much on game day. You're making that decision. Sometimes obviously you have an idea going into a game, how much you want a guy to play or a certain set of guys. But sometimes the game will get away from you or turn a different way than you were expecting. And suddenly you're playing maybe a rotation that you weren't really expecting to heading into the game, but you think you've got a good matchup of guys humming on a certain opponent that you're really being able to take advantage of. So you let him out there a little bit more than you had planned on, etc. There's a lot that goes into it. And I'm only like what I've just talked about, and I've been talking a little bit here, that only scratches the surface. There is a whole lot that it can affect. There's no doubt about it. Dennis, how are you, man? Thanks for the super chat. On NFL Today, they said Schottenheimer will be bringing in the defense to meetings. Do Packers have mixed meetings, including both offense and defense? They have a team meeting, no doubt about that, but it's rare where like you're working on offense or defense together until you get out on the practice field and you're maybe doing the kind of team stuff, right? Where you're going ones versus ones and things of that nature. That doesn't mean they don't ever do it, but mostly the offense is working with the offense and vice versa. Now, they do have some cross-pollination when it comes to the coaching staff. We've seen that in the past. Look no further than last year, the Robert Saleh coming in with a defensive background, working with the offensive team. But more often than not, it is pretty segregated. Josh, thanks for the super chat, man. Appreciate you. What do you think with the plan? What do you think the plan with Javon Bullard is? And why does it seem like the fan base is so down on him? I think he's got a lot of growth left. Josh, you 100% hit it on the head there. I think it is interesting to see the perception of Bullard's rookie year. I mean, I do think he was taken advantage of at times in coverage, but I think I think a lot of that happened during weeks where he had practiced all week in one spot and then was made to rotate because of injury. And then he did look out of sorts or late to the ball or things of that nature. He's a rookie, right? And I do not doubt for a moment that he will take a significant step forward in year two. I do think the plan is to continue to utilize him in the slot as much as they can. And that's something I've talked about on a couple different chats and videos here, where people talk about the cornerback room and the issue of depth. Well, he is a major component in the slot, right? You can count him as a nickel, essentially, right? That is how he has operated, or they preferred to operate with him in his rookie season. I also think, yes, of course, he needs to improve from the traditional safety spot. I think there's every possibility and probability that he does, but I do think he will most likely be kind of centered around that kind of slot position in dime, most likely. I do think early downs when they're in nickel, I know they've talked about Hobbs playing kind of on the perimeter, but I do think he's going to bounce inside and out. I also think on early downs when they are in nickel, you'll see Bullard there in the slot sometimes as well. I think some of it will be opponent dependent. Schematically, what are they facing? What does the opponent like to do? Is there a guy that is really twitchy as a two-way go? Because that I don't think will be Bullard. I think that will be Hobbs. But is there a team that likes to kind of widen out their tight end or even put their tight end in the slot? That's when I think you'll see Bullard. Again, I think it will be pretty matchup dependent, but I do think that's his best spot. And I think that will continue to be the case his second year. John, how are you, man? Got asked this last week. Any interest in the Favre doc on Netflix? I am interested. Yeah, I mean, simply because it's, not a player-controlled documentary. The fact that there's going to be some, obviously, non-flattering kind of behind-the-scenes stuff being spoken about and uncovered, hopefully. I think, yeah, I'm pretty interested. Simply because, and I've talked about it here on the channel a couple times, man, I'm as guilty as anyone for the Favre worship that elevated him into a position that seemingly catapulted him into a headspace where he thought or thinks he can do nothing wrong. I'm very, very guilty of that. No doubt about it. So, yes, I am very interested to watch. Ed, thanks for the super chat, man. Do you think Matt LaFleur will ever acknowledge all the great ideas he picks up from Cheesehead TV? And, I doubt it. I'm pretty sure at this point, the only, acknowledgement or kind of interaction he has with any content at Cheesehead TV is when in the flow of a game, when I get upset, I will certainly say something negative, or when I'm frustrated with a call, or maybe I tweet something out during a game where I'm in disagreement with one of his choices. I'm pretty certain there's someone in the building, and I think I know who it is, that puts that stuff in front of him. But never, ever do they seemingly put the positive stuff in front of him, the stuff where I praise him, which is often, but that never seems to get in front of him. I don't know why. It's curious. Very curious. Matthew, thanks for the super chat, man. Is the plan to make Hobbs or Bullard the nickel? Now, Matthew, I just talked about this at length. I do think it will be opponent / game plan dependent. I think that will be a major component. I don't think there's any doubt that they will probably both get long looks during training camp, and possibly maybe they settle on quote unquote, the guy, which is, preferable. But I also think they got a lot of upside there and a lot of maneuverability and versatility, which is something we know they love, right? All right, everybody, I'm going to have to get going. I cannot thank you enough for hanging out, talking Packers each and every day, Monday through Friday, right here on the Cheesehead TV social channels. Please do me a monster favor. Hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and then tell your friends and tell your family. Cheesehead TV, we are devoted to Green Bay Packers fans worldwide. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great night. Go Pack Go.